For our Behind the Crime presentation, we chose to study Ed Kemper, and we used social control theory. This is by Aubrielle Patson, Reese Ingram, Ella McLinn, and Matthew Obiala.
Childhood of Edmund Kemper. Edmund Kemper was raised by his mother, who tended to be physically and emotionally abusive towards him. His father wasn't in the picture, so he spent a lot of time with his mother. His pent-up rage towards her was taken out on his sister's dolls. He would dismember them and decapitate them in a ritualistic manner. He struggled to form relationships with his peers at a young age, and he was commonly picked on for his height. Childhood continued. He displayed violence on animals, carrying over the same ritualistic patterns we saw with the dolls. At the age of 14, he ran away from his mother to find his dad. His dad rejected Kemper living with him, and Kemper was then sent to live with his grandparents. A year into living with his grandparents, he shot them both. He was then institutionalized for 5 years. Kemper's adult life. Upon Kemper's release, he was sent back to live with his mother. His fantasies of murdering her had started back up, however, he wanted to practice this time before killing her. His victims were female hitchhikers, and his methodology included decapitation, stabbing, strangling, dissection, and having intercourse with their dead bodies. He murdered 6 women this way. His 7th victim in the series of killing was his mother. He killed her while she was asleep and slit her throat open and also decapitated her. After killing his mother, he called her best friend to the house and smashed her skull with a brick. He then had intercourse with her dead body, and he was charged with 8 counts of first-degree murder. He currently resides in a California medical facility.
The creator of social control theory is American sociologist and criminologist Travis Hirschi. His social control theory is based on the idea that external controls drive people to conformity and delinquency. Hirschi believed that social bonds are a key factor in understanding delinquency. Specifically, when one has weak social bonds, there's an absence of external constraints leading to crime. His book, Causes of Delinquency, published in 1969, outlines this exactly, this keeping adolescents and young adults in mind. Hirschi describes 4 elements of the social bond: attachment, commitment, belief, and involvement. These elements are the fundamentals to the connection of social bonds. Attachment, the most important of the elements, refers to the attachment of those who participate in social norms. With weak social bonds, an example of this could be a disregard for others. Commitment emphasizes the commitment to society and conventional goals. With weak social bonds, it could be a lack of attachment to community, like not being invested in career goals or education. The less one is committed to something, the more room there is for risk, thus more susceptible to delinquency. Belief refers to the idea that norms and laws hold legitimacy and are less likely to not be broken. If an individual does not relate to this as it contributes to weak social bonds, for example, they find that the laws against illicit drugs are not relevant to them. Then they may be more likely to participate in their use. Involvement is aimed towards the physical participation in conventional activities. The more someone is involved in something, the less time they have for deviance. With someone who has weak social bonds, for example, the less likely they are to be involved in participating in something like school or work, the more time they have to participate in recreational drugs or illicit substances. In terms of romantic relationships, teens who experience romantic love are less likely to commit crime. However, when a teen who does not experience this type of connection or love and who already has weak social bonds, it increases the possibility of juvenile delinquency, which increases adult criminality.
So for the applying the control theory, juvenile delinquency is often a common precursor to future criminal behavior, a trait that Ed Kemper showed continuously throughout his childhood. Social control theory is typically oriented to explain juvenile behavior, which is why it accurately explains Ed Kemper's criminal behaviors. As described earlier, weak elements of social bonds inevitably lead to crime, and Ed Kemper's childhood lacked strong social bonds. To begin, his family life was cruel and abusive, and by living in a household with an abusive mother and absent father, it was a given that Kemper would lack the element of attachment. Social control theory states that if only one of the elements is missing, then it causes crime. But there's a further argument to describe each element's absence in Kemper's life. He had no involvement in school and was seen as an outcast by many of his peers, and he also lacked commitment to success and conventional goals. because he was never encouraged to succeed academically in his upbringing. Additionally, his belief system was distorted by the abuse and the parental cruelty that he endured in his childhood, confusing his idea of social norms and moral validity. Considering all of his failures in the elements of social bonds, it makes sense that Kemper turned out the way he did, and his experience reinforces the greater understanding of social control theory. Social control theory also shares the idea that people who experience teenage romantic love are less likely to commit crime. In high school, he never experienced true romantic love because of his lonely tendencies and social disinterest. However, once he was released from prison, he became romantically involved with a 17 to 18-year-old girl who was popular in her hometown. This may have been compensation for his lonely high school experience by engaging himself with a younger person who was also known for her involvement. It also shows his later desire for attachment after a stressful childhood of abuse and torment. Overall, social control theory is applicable in many aspects of Ed Kemper's juvenile years and his early adulthood.
Proposal number 1. The first policy proposal that we would implicate or use in this case would be a scheduled monthly house visits from social services. If there were monthly check-ins from social services, they would have been able to be aware and see the abuse that Edmund was enduring and living in and remove him from that abusive household, putting him into a possible foster home. One of the core parts that social control theory kind of focuses on is attachment. As stated, Kemper had little to no positive attachment to his parents, as his relationship with his mother was very abusive and his father had been absent. When the relationship between him and his mother became extremely strained and filled with emotional abuse, she ended up sending him to live with his grandparents, where he endured not only more emotional abuse, but also physical abuse as well. With this policy, if there were regular social services or mandated child protective service visits, they would be able to see the toxic and abusive environment Kemper was living in and be able to remove him from those conditions and place him into foster care. Removing him from that household and putting him into a healthier environment could have strengthened that lack of social attachment that he had and was previously not able to have while he was living there. And then this could, from there, help him get any sort of therapy that he might have needed and just an ultimately better support system that he just was lacking in his previous home. Policy number 2, the second policy that we would implicate would be a mandatory social program at school for isolated students that are lacking any sort of involvement and are just kind of at a higher risk of either like falling behind in the social connections and just lacking those social skills that are needed throughout life. Other core elements in social control theory are commitment and involvement, which Edmund lacked immensely. He was said to be very quiet and sheltered in school with no friendships. He also wasn't involved in any sort of clubs or extracurricular activities, which only kept him more isolated and uninvolved. With this type of policy, it would have strongly encouraged Kemper to build friendships and be able to advance his social skills to build connections with other students, which could have also helped with the attachment element of social control theory. This program would have different clubs and extracurriculars for students similar to Kemper who are also withdrawn and lacking connection. There would also be counselors in this program that would help to observe and work on Kemper's behaviors to help with any signs of concerning behavior that he might have been exhibiting from a closer, more specialized perspective. This program would overall help any other students and that are like Kemper himself to become more involved in school, to get him more commitment, and just to help him get some structure and just overall increase his commitment and involvement in school, which would ultimately lead him to be less likely to be involved in any sort of criminal behavior. And then the last slide is just a slide of all of the references that we used throughout the project.